Okay, 9 a.m. Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee, back for budget hearings day 2, Council Bill 21-0080, the ordinance of estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. Mayor Costello, Councilman for the 11th District, Chair of the committee. I'm joined by Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District, member of the committee, Council Vice President Sharon Middleton, 6th District, member of the committee, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District. On behalf of Mayor Brandon Scott is Nina Themelis. On behalf of Council President Nick Mosby is Nikki Thompson. Staff to the committee is Marguerite Curran. We are here today. First session is Baltimore Development Corporation. Colin, please take it away.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. It's good to be with some of you in person and good to I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and pull up the presentations. Just one second. Okay, everyone should be able to see my screen now. Slide is Baltimore Development Corporation, fiscal 22 budget presentation. As the chair said, my name is Colin Tarbert. I serve as president and CEO of the Baltimore Development Corporation. I'm also joined in person with Kim Clark, who's our executive vice president of BDC, as well as Jeff Pillis and David Damsky are with us virtually in case there's any additional questions from the committee. So we have 3 services that I will go through. Our first service is service number 809. This is the retention, expansion, and attraction of businesses. In short, this is the bread and butter, what BDC does. This is really focusing on increasing jobs in the city with a focus on making sure that our city residents have opportunity for those jobs. So we focus on key growth sectors. We focus on retaining businesses, which is really the key strategy so that those businesses then can expand. But of course, we're always looking to attract new businesses to the city and new investment. So this service number is recommended at $2.5 million, which is basically the current level of service. And we have performance measures, output and outcome. As you'll see here, the projections for FY22. The output is the number of companies that BDC assist to stay in the city. We're projected at 174, down a little bit just because of COVID, and I can talk about it later, but BDC has been obviously for the last year plus really focused on helping businesses through the pandemic. So that's our output. Outcome is the number of jobs created and or retained in the city. And so you'll see those figures there, roughly 1,700 projected for FY22. Our second service is real estate development. This is also funded at 2.5 million, essentially half business development, half real estate. This is us working on projects, both public projects and private projects, to help them through the development process, approvals, negotiating the sale and lease of city-owned properties. We also oversee a number of business parks, and BDC serves as the single point of contact for anyone interested in developing in the city. We have the output performance measure here is the total value of projects that are in the BDC real estate development pipeline that we expect to close in the fiscal year. And then our outcome is the dollar amount of value of private investment that we leverage with public investment. And so I just will note on this slide, as you can see, there's a significant increase in FY22 in what we expect to close. So we are hopeful you'll see about $1 billion of real estate development projects. That is driven by Port Covington, which is a significant project, as members of the committee are aware of, as well as a project in the West Baltimore in the University of Maryland Biopark. So we're hopeful that those two projects will continue to move forward. That's driving in large part that number. You also see the leverage dollars, $6, which is a little lower, but that's also driven by the tax increment financing, I believe, that was invested by the city for Port Covington. So just wanted to kind of note those numbers for FY22. And then third is technology development, emerging technology center. We did request this title to be expanded to include Made in Baltimore. In the heading, you will see Made in Baltimore noted here. But this service is approximately $866,000. This is for the Emerging Technology Centers, which is operated under BDC. That's our tech incubator located on Haven Street. Very successful operation, a little over 20 years in the making. And our Made in Baltimore program, which is very popular as well, which BDC took in, if you will, about 2 years ago. It was born in the planning department. So that's basically the split here. And in terms of performance measures, our output is the total of jobs created by all current companies, and you see an estimated 300 jobs based on this program service. And then the effectiveness is the percentage of graduates that are still in business, and we're looking at about an 80% rate there. You can see the actual for FY20 was 93%, which is great. That concludes the three BDC services and our budget presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions the chair or committee may have.
Thanks, Colin. Can you take the presentation down, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you go into a little bit BDC's role in terms of economic recovery during the pandemic and some of the grant programs that you all worked on and really took the lead on?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. Really, since last March, BDC has been nearly 100% focused on the economic recovery and assistance through the pandemic. All told, I think BDC has administered about $19 million in recovery aid, which is significant. You can see our budget's only about $5 million. And so it's been quite a lift on behalf of all the team at BDC. That's been split up into a number of programs that we've launched. One is with Made in Baltimore, which I just talked about. We provided funding and grants to small manufacturers in the city to make personal protective equipment, and we actually helped the city procure PPE for some of the frontline workers. I apologize. Let me close that chime. It's my email. Which is a very successful program. So local makers were able to scale up, were able to hire new employees and manufacture hand sanitizer, face mask, medical gowns, all here in Baltimore City. So that was one of the initial programs that we rolled out very early when the city and others were having difficulties getting supplies, and in particular PPE, to deal with the pandemic. Then we moved into a series of grants for small businesses, which was really a lifeline for those small businesses. And we targeted and prioritized businesses owned by people of color, businesses in neighborhoods, both our Main Street districts, our commercial districts, to distribute funds equitably across the city. And we also focused on locally owned businesses, meaning city resident owned businesses. So we don't have the final grant tally will be done in the next couple weeks, but based on where we are to date, which is about 5 rounds of grants, roughly 2/3 of our grants went to minority owned businesses, a little more than half went to women owned businesses, and a roughly 2/3 went to city resident owned businesses. So we really tried to be hyper focused on the businesses that one, were important to our communities, but two, were also more likely to be left out of other programs at the federal level or state level. That was really important to us. And so one of the key decisions that we made at the beginning of the pandemic was a thoughtful approach to how we would distribute the funds. And we did it based on need. And so we did it not do it first come, first serve. A few of the programs that we saw either in other cities or at the state level were first come, first serve. And what we saw was those resources go to the folks that were most resourced, that had their paperwork, that had access to online submissions, et cetera. And so we paused and had a window open so that everyone had time to submit their information. They could contact BDC, get the assistance that they needed. And then we, again, prioritized based on those factors I mentioned earlier in order to get the funds to those who most needed it. And we kind of continued that process and we refined that process each time to make sure that we were funding the businesses that needed it. So that was approximately probably $17 million in total grants. Most of those grants ranged in the $10,000 range, so it was lots of checks. Our printer's probably broken out of ink, but we typically don't issue that many checks. We've got a very small staff, and want to commend Jeff Pillis and his team for all the weekends that they came in to stuff envelopes and print checks, and Kim and I signed a bunch of those as well. So great team effort on that. And the other piece that I wanted to mention, in addition to the grants, which was really part and parcel to being able to get funding to the businesses that need it, was a technical assistance network that BDC was, very pleased to be asked to lead on behalf of a number of organizations. It's actually 19 different organizations, in addition to BDC, that came together to help our small business community. It was funded through philanthropy, and it's proven to be very successful in terms of outreach, connecting with businesses that needed assistance with PPP, which is the federal payroll protection program, loan forgiveness program. We've helped, I believe, about 2,000 businesses through that network, which BDC would have never been able to do alone, with a lot of partners, including Latino Economic Development Corporation, the Baltimore Black Business Chamber, just a whole series of partners that had come together, both technical assistants and lenders, as well as grassroots organizations to help us connect with those businesses. So we were able to take businesses that had been rejected for a PPP loan, work with them, get them the technical assistance that they needed, get them and connect it with another partner lender that was been working with us, and get them that PPP loan. So we, heard from businesses that it was really a save their business, which was wonderful for us to hear. It was also a little bit disheartening to hear so many businesses struggling to get through programs. And so long term, we want to be able to fix that. The network served, I believe it was over 60% were businesses owned by people of color, who had more difficulty accessing some of the programs. And so we're looking at policies and ways to improve that more long term in terms of our economic recovery.
Thank you. I know you all have had your hands full, and I finally have an opportunity to thank Jeff for coming in on the weekend and stuffing envelopes. I've heard that story a number of times from Colin and Kim, so really appreciate everything that you all did to help support our small business community throughout the pandemic. I want to recognize Councilman Isaac Yitzhak Schleifer from the 5th District, member of the committee, Councilman Mark Conway, 4th District, Councilwoman Danny McCray, 2nd District, member of the committee. Colleagues, any questions? Councilman
Yes.
Dorsey,
Oh,
and then Council Vice President Middleton after.
Mr. Chair, I'd be glad to defer to the Vice President to go first.
Madam VP, thank you, Councilman.
thank you, Councilman, but you can go ahead. Go ahead.
And Councilman
Thank you.
Dorsey, thank you, Madam VP. Councilman, your volume's a little low.
Sorry, I'm probably kind of far back.
Yep, there we go.
Hey, Colin, thanks everybody. I don't think I have to tell anybody how thankful I've been for the Design for Distancing program. When Colin took the position, the helm at BDC, we sat in my office at City Hall as one did back in those times. And I basically said, here's the one thing that BDC can do above all else to assist my district. And it was literally an explanation of how to do exactly what design for distancing is. I think it's been a real success where it has occurred, and I think that there is a clear interest in expanding that. And I guess one of my questions is, with the ARP funds, first of all, do we have data that is specific to that program on impacts to job retention, job creation, business retention, things like that? And with ARP funds, is this something that BDC would be interested in expanding? Because I certainly know that, other areas in my district would benefit from this, and I'd like to see it.
Thank you, Councilman, for the question. And I think when we met back in those days, I said, well, BDC we don't do traffic mitigation. We don't, that's what DOT does. And then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden we became street designers. So I think your comments I've heard from community members and businesses that the design for distancing has been, a really welcome improvement for a lot of commercial districts. It was very helpful for businesses, in particular restaurants that couldn't operate indoors, to be able to take over some of the right of way and use it. So we don't have. I would love to do a more in-depth, kind of detailed study about design for distancing, especially from the economic development angle. I think some businesses have been not only able to survive, but actually kind of increase their business as a result. Of course, it is a little weather dependent, so we ran into that issue during the winter. But yeah, I think BDC is very interested in continuing that program to work with communities, maybe make some of these installations more permanent. The construction was meant to be temporary for approximately a year, and so there's probably needs to be a refresh or a rethink if some of these are going to be more permanent. But we will be requesting some funding through ARPA for our comprehensive economic development strategy, which we call Baltimore Together, to look at some of these. So I think that could help us maybe mine some data from businesses and just kind of do some basic surveying to kind of get the more details on the basic impact that it's had from an economic development standpoint, and then potentially more capital funds for permanent is something that we'd be happy to look at. We would obviously want to do it with our partners who were instrumental in getting the installation done. So between Department of Transportation, Housing, and Health, and a few others, happy to look at that. I think it's been successful, and there's a need for it.
Thanks. I think I think it's clear that a lot of people want to see this remain a permanent kind of change to our streetscapes, and a permanently kind of adopted kind of MO for how business districts, business corridors could and should look throughout the city, how people should interact with space. I'd like to, I guess one of the things I hope that BDC could help take some leadership on is kind of the next phase for the ones that exist already, because I know that there is some question and concern about like the burden shifting to main streets to have, long-term liability policies or whatever, and instead just saying like, this is how public space should be used, and we should be helping to make this easier for them, not unlike the kind of year after year thing that comes up about minor privileges and right-of-way privileges for businesses. We need to be kind of clearing this stuff out of people's way, and I hope that BDC can help with that. Yeah, and just expand this to have a more permanent place in our city. You know, not designed for distancing, but like really like designed for businessing. Is kind of what I think that we should be doing. So I just appreciate the leadership on that. And again, thank you for it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before we jump to the Vice President, I just want to echo what Councilman Dorsey said in terms of the Design for Distancing program, and coupled with BDC's efforts on the outdoor dining relief program, outdoor dining street closure program. And when you put those three things together in our Main Street areas, I think you've seen a really positive outcome. I also want to take a moment to thank Mayor Scott for his leadership. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, an announcement was made to extend those outdoor seating programs for a year. I think that was the right call, and it was something that was very welcomed, not only by our restaurant community, but our small business community, because those small businesses that are in close proximity to restaurants that have outdoor seating, they certainly benefit from having folks out on the street, having the street activated. So Colin, thank you for all your incredible work on that. Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you,
We've
Mr.
also
Chair.
been joined by Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District member of the committee.
So I first of all also want to thank you, Colin and Kim and your team for the business work that you continue to do throughout Baltimore. Councilman Dorsey kind of opened up some of the, I guess, information that or question, comment that I want to share and would like your comment. So we know that the Pimlico area is going through massive redevelopment that's basically going to affect the whole entire city. And we do have an area that it's sitting in the center of, and that's Park Heights, which is an historical area, an area that at one time also had thriving businesses, and people are, it's still a number of challenged neighborhoods throughout that whole northwest area that will be affected by this major redevelopment. I'd just like you to talk a little bit about that, if there's some updates on how BDC is involved in that. And also, are there going to be loans and grants specifically in that area and other challenged historical areas throughout the city that have been neglected, just like Park Heights?
Thank you, Madam Vice President, for the question. Yep, the Pimlico redevelopment, as you know, is very exciting, and in previous roles, I've worked with you very closely in the Park Heights community to move things forward. And I think we're starting to see the results of many years of long hard work, which is exciting and great to see. The commercial corridor along Park Heights Avenue is a great. It's got great bones, but it does have its challenges, as you know. And I think it really can become the main street of that whole new redevelopment, both not just at Pimlico, the race course track, but also to the south in the major redevelopment area, and hopefully, what expands beyond that. So we're very interested in helping that area, that commercial district, be revitalized. There's a number of very successful businesses there, but there's also a number of vacancies and other issues that we want to be helpful with. So I think that the Pimlico redevelopment and what happens there has to be planned in close coordination with the vision for that commercial corridor. And we know that there's a number of business owners and leaders, Sister Israel and others, who have a vision that we want to be able to support that community vision for that district. So I think there's a number of programs. I don't know if there's going to be anything sort of specific as part of the Pimlico project per se, but I think that BDC's existing programs, which we want to continue to strengthen, and hopefully we can do some of that with the ARPA funds, could go towards that. So we've been working, one, as I mentioned, on the technical assistance network, but two, we're trying to figure out how to get more capital into the hands of businesses that need it, that might not either have been able to access capital. Hopefully we can provide lower cost capital, and to the extent that we can provide grants, that's great. We usually don't have that level of resource, but obviously through the pandemic, we've been fortunate to have that federal funding. So I think BDC working closely also with the Neighborhood Impact Investment Fund, which you're familiar with, we can figure out ways to get capital to those small businesses to invest in their properties, and then hopefully build out the development around it to really support that commercial district. But I really see the opportunity to have those two be almost one seamless project where, as the Pimlico site gets redeveloped, we're making investments in the corridor and outside of the project site. It can't just be an insular project. It has to go beyond the sight lines.
Thank you, Colin. And then just one my second and last question.
That my computer.
One of the
Okay.
businesses.
Council Vice President, can you
hear me?
start? Yeah, can you start from the top? You cut out there for a second.
Oh, okay. Okay, so this is about one of the businesses that's throughout our entire city, and you might know a little bit about some of it. That's Family Dollar, which I know that we have businesses that come into our city, and basically throughout the years, they prove to be disrespectful and a nuisance. And Family Dollar is one of them. And I know there has been some work that had been started with your team along with housing code enforcement. And I know to, I guess, get rid of chain businesses like that. But has there been discussion, or it's very these businesses, the communities have allowed them these areas.
Council Vice
Bad
President,
actors,
you're
I'm still going in and out.
Yeah, can you send me a message with your question? If you could send me an email with
anything
question.
you know about Family Dollar, you can help.
Yeah, I think we've had this discussion before, so I think I can fill in your question, and I'll try to answer it, and then you can tell me if I didn't quite get it. But I think the issue is that Family Dollar and maybe other businesses haven't operated the way communities want. I know I've seen it, graffiti, trash, other issues that affect the community with certain operators. It's a bad operator. I don't think that it's necessarily a result of it being a national brand or a national chain. We have plenty of those in the city, which are great and do good things for the community and provide jobs. In certain instances, we've had issues in particular with Family Dollar, probably some others that are similar in not keeping their property to the level that we would expect a corporate, owner to do so. And so we're happy to continue to work with you. We've reached out to Family Dollar in the past about certain properties that we thought weren't appropriate, and of course we lean on our friends at Housing and Community Development to cite them when they deserve to be cited. So I think we're happy to continue to do that. I think bigger picture, there's not much that one, we wouldn't necessarily want to discourage businesses from investing in the city if they're a national brand. We certainly welcome them, but we want them obviously to be good neighbors. We want them to work with the community. And I would say by and large, many do, but then we have bad actors. I don't think there's a way to prohibit national chains in neighborhoods. Zoning sort of is agnostic on that. It's really about the use. But we do encourage, BDC has been working to encourage more local ownership. So if you heard when I talked about the grants, the majority of those went to city-owned, not even just sort of locally owned, but city-owned businesses, which is important. And we're trying to help our entrepreneurs in the community because I think everyone likes to have, local businesses in their community. It's more sustainable. We get to circulate the dollar more often. So I think really we just need to have a conversation with some of these property owners to make sure that they're meeting the needs of our community and not, taking advantage of our neighbors.
And Colin, if you could have someone from your team reach out to the vice president today to talk through any specific concerns on that one. And Council Vice President, I think we're going to have housing in later today. So we'll make sure that the acting commissioner follows up with you as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Colin. And thank you for your team and all the work that you can continue to do in our city. Appreciate your leadership.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here, and good morning, committee members. I have a couple of questions. One is a lot of your indicators talk about jobs created. I'm wondering how you're calculating that. Does it include the 941 form filing? Does it also include 1099s? Because one thing that we found, and maybe you found this during the pandemic and just in general, lots of people decided to start their own businesses, and they're not necessarily, with W-2s. And so what is that indicator that you're using? And are we making sure to be able to capture sort of that whole set of folks that are actually not just getting a job with a corporation or a business, but actually starting their own businesses and working that way?
I'll start the answer and then Kim can finish it or correct me if I get it wrong. But the short answer is for these particular job figures, these are tied to projects or businesses that we're working with directly. So in most cases, they're probably not 1099 employees. They're probably employees of the company, so W-2 employees. However, I would say under technology development, which is Made in Baltimore and ETC, we do have a number of probably independent entrepreneurs. So that's where we would pick up people who have started their business, whether it's a home-based business that's growing or an entrepreneur at the Emerging Technology Center. We have a lot of just individuals who are looking to start a business. Made in Baltimore in particular, some of these are businesses that are starting as hobbies, so they might be cooking or making or art that they're looking to turn into a business and maybe a livelihood. ETC is more oriented towards, technology businesses that have a higher growth capacity, but many just start as a person who might have a membership at ETC, is learning to put together their business plan, looking for funding, looking for partners. So I think the individual piece would probably be captured under 813, and then under, I think, 809, those are more of like the larger, I wouldn't even say larger businesses. They're small businesses, but could range anything from a mom and pop shop to an Amazon, for example. So I don't know if Kim wants to add anything to that. Okay, got it right.
Thank you. So just as a follow-up, so the jobs that you're talking about in your indicators are specifically how you are impacting those people as well. So it's not only and then the other question, did I hear you earlier? And I was driving into City Hall, so excuse me if I didn't hear properly. That the service that says Emerging Technology Center, you asked for the change in the title because Made in Baltimore is not technology focused, but it's in that service. Are you going to be changing that or moving Made in Baltimore out? Because I think the work that Made in Baltimore is doing is really phenomenal, and might need to be its own service.
Yeah, Kim can take that one. I mean, the short answer is I think we wanted to just include them together, but the title again can change. So we just wanted to make sure that the council members understood that that's where Made in Baltimore was, so you didn't miss it. But I'll let Kim answer in terms of whether or not we want to separate them or not.
Yeah, so we had changed the title of the service to entrepreneurship, which that is what Made in Baltimore is. And it came about when when Made in Baltimore came to be at BDC, they weren't getting much funding from the city. They were getting some, but it was a lot based upon Andy going out and getting grants all around the world. So I worked with Bob Saname in BBMR last year, and we put a stipend in that sector, and it was still called Emerging Technology Center. So this year we requested the change because Made in Baltimore is now included in that service. We wanted to change it to entrepreneurship because we felt that was a much more appropriate title for that service. So unfortunately, let's blame COVID. We blame it on everything else. The change wasn't actually made in the title of the service, but we had requested that, and we'll continue to push for that.
Okay, sure. Anything you need from me, let me know. Andy is my constituent. I think he's doing a great job. I'll save my other questions for the next round. Thanks a lot, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We've also been joined by Natasha Mihu on behalf of Mayor Brandon Scott, as well as Councilwoman Felicia Porter from the 10th District and Bob Saname, Budget Director for the administration. Councilwoman Porter, did you have a question?
No, sir, I don't have any questions.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Conway?
Sure. I want to start off just by thanking Colin and his team for the excellent work that you guys have been doing. Of course, all the council members before me did the same, so I'm obliged to do the same. You guys have been great during the pandemic, in supporting businesses, helping make sure that we can continue to survive and thrive, but then also thinking more broadly and some of the work that you and I, Colin, have been talking about, the greater, bigger picture for Baltimore and developing Baltimore. So I just want to thank you on that behalf. My questions are quite simple. I have one question about the ETC. Also, as a sort of, I guess, technically former alumni of ETC, when in my nonprofit days, we worked out of the ETC, so love that space. I think it's a great opportunity to help build fledgling businesses and help them grow with that support structure. But I noticed that from that you guys exceeded this target, but that the cost jumped up from about $1,400 to $3,100 for the cost per job created. I was just a little curious about what may cause that, noticing the number of businesses, the number of jobs created gone down significantly. Just tell me a little bit about what we're seeing there and how we're looking to tackle it.
Let me address the job number first. I think that was mainly the impact you see from COVID in FY20. So it was a reduction. There's just a lot less people at ETC. I mean, we basically shut down ETC from an office standpoint. Obviously, people were virtual, so I think that's the indicator there that you're seeing in terms of the actual figures. In terms of the increase, I don't. If you're looking at to Kim saying it was because the office is closed, we weren't getting rent, which was driving down the revenue. So it cost us more.
That makes total sense. I think that's the only questions I have now. Also, I'll just sort of commend you guys for exceeding that target for dollars leverage over $100 million. Great work there, and looking forward to continuing to work with you on building the city. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman McCray?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Councilman Schleifer?
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Back to the top. I think we went Dorsey first.
Mr. Chair, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Middleton?
No further questions.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. Wanted to also circle back on the conversation that was just happening with Council Vice President Middleton. We are getting a Dollar General on Greenmount Avenue, and we didn't know. There was no public input. There was no public process for what to do with the old Rite Aid building. And I'm unsure what BDC's role in that is, because I realized it was a private transaction. But it's very upsetting given the work that we're trying to do there. And nothing against Dollar General in general. It's just that when we have one 4 blocks away and the trash is everywhere and they're not being a good partner, that's the problem. So I don't know if you can address that directly, but if you'd include me in the conversation, Madam Vice President, if you don't mind my being involved in the conversation about those two entities, that would be great. So I guess the broader question around that specific example is, BDC's role in helping to bring in businesses to our commercial corridors and the public processes that we think need to happen. What is that? What is that process that you would normally go through?
Colin, before you answer that, I just want to make sure that we stay general, just because we're trying to avoid the district specific questions. But I would ask that you have someone from your team follow up with Councilwoman Ramos today to talk about the specifics of that. But if you could get into that process, and at the end of that, Councilwoman Ramos, just as a heads up, we will have HCD in here later today, and hopefully they can address some of, the trash issues that you're experiencing, 4 or 5 blocks away, as well as provide some support should that become an issue with this location. Colin?
Sure. No, I appreciate the question and I understand the concern. The short answer is it depends on the situation. I think in like the case that you described where there's an existing building, it's essentially a new tenant fit out. They're just going to go through the permit process of a building permit and a use and occupancy. So there is no public process per se. In other cases, it might be a conditional use, or if it's a new building, and they're going through design site plan review, you're gonna have the opportunity for more community input. So I think it just depends on a case by case basis. Obviously, BDC is not sort of trying to turn away any businesses or investments, but as to the vice president, the comment I had to her was we want to have the right businesses in our community with the right attitude. So whether it's a Dollar General or a Family Dollar or another user, we don't want to see trash or those types of issues from any business, whether it's locally owned or nationally owned. So it sort of depends. I think in terms of BDC's role, we try to work with those national chains. We do have relationships with them, and we try to make sure that we're reaching out to their point of contact for the region or whoever might be the right person to make sure that if there are concerns that they're addressed. But the process is going to depend on each location, and BDC just tries to know what's happening to the best that we can, but oftentimes, we find out when you find out.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Going back to the work that you did with the federal money, when you tally all the numbers, because you said that you're not quite finished yet, could we also get that list to see, who's gotten those dollars? I think you've done a great job, and I'm really appreciative of you sort of switching from, doing, business development to then grant making. So I understand that was a tough transition, but you did it. So I'm interested to know sort of the results. But also, it was my understanding that the priority was on brick and mortar businesses and not always on the entrepreneurs. Is that for the federal money that you got? Is that correct? I mean, they had to pay rent, right? So that's the other reason to kind of see the list is, if the entrepreneurs, were able to get some of that money in addition to brick and mortar.
Councilwoman, I think that's 2 questions. So let's go to, can you do your request, the data request first? Can you put that for me in 1 sentence?
Yes, I'm interested to know the list of the organizations that received federal money from the pass through the BDC.
So you're just talking about, so I don't know that. So there are a number of different grant programs. Some of them were funded, most of them were funded locally. Although it was a pass through to the city and then it went to BDC. So can you be more specific? Is there a specific grant program? Or are we talking about all the grant programs?
I'd like to see all of the programs that you got for recovery money.
Okay,
Specific recovery money.
So you want to see the $19 million broken out by program and then the recipients and the amounts?
Yep.
Okay, is that data that you all have readily available, or is that going to take some time?
I wouldn't say it's readily available, but we have obviously all of that. We're still going through the last round, so we haven't made awards for the last round of grantees, but we will have all that data pulled together. We do an annual report on a calendar year, so some of it will be captured in that, which we're working on. But we may just put out a piece, to kind of cover all of the COVID. To your point, though, I would say more than half of the funds were specific to restaurants. That was state funded, so those wouldn't capture entrepreneurs. We did about $7.5 million of CARES Act money, which was federal money, which was designated just for generally small businesses. We did prioritize and focus on brick and mortar businesses kind of in our main streets and commercial corridors. So you will probably see that as opposed to just an entrepreneur who might be working in their house. But we will be providing all of that data. I presented at the council maybe 2 months ago. The data that we had at that point, more breakdown of percentages, not names and amounts. But we will be able to provide all of that probably in the next, 60 days is probably reasonable to pull it together, at least by the end of summer.
Councilwoman, are you good on that so we're saying
great.
end summer? Okay. Nina, 13? 13. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Councilwoman Ramos, back to you.
I'm good, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Excellent. Colleagues, any other questions? All right, Colin, Kim, thank you so much. Want to thank you for everything that you guys continue to do. As far as I'm concerned, BDC is probably one of the top 3 functioning agencies in city government. Appreciate all the hard work. Want to give special thanks to Dan Taylor, of course, and I'd be remiss not to thank Justin Lane for all of his hard work at BDC. Justin, who used to work for me, but he's doing a great job there, and you got a ton of great folks there that are doing great work. So thank you very much. We are now in recess. We'll be back at 10 a.m. sharp for Visit Baltimore and the Convention Center. Thank you.